there where it says internal evidence archaeology. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. Now, archaeology is outside of the Bible. Archaeology is external, but we're talking about archaeological writings about about historical people, places, situations, and what kind of corroboration for that do we find outside the Bible. So, quick story. When I was a freshman in college, I had to take Religion 101, just a general religion class at St. Olaf. And I've told you some of the things I was taught in that class. One of the things I was taught by my professor was that the walls of Jericho fell long before Joshua showed up and the Israelites showed up. And they just claimed victory and made up the story about the walls going flat. And all those children that have been all singing that song all these years are wrong. And I didn't know whether to believe that or not because I didn't know enough whether to believe that. But a number of years later, probably 6, 7 years later, I was on an airplane and with nothing to do, so I pulled out the airplane magazine, and there was an article about Jericho. Seems where they thought Jericho was not actually where Jericho was. You know, those tells where they build on top of each other and everything, and they were in the wrong place. They found the actual Jericho, and this was not a Christian magazine, and it was not a Christian writer. And this is what he said. The walls of Jericho, I remember it very well. The walls of Jericho fell at about in an instant, at about the same time as the Israelites showed up. About the same time. It was the same time. It's archaeological evidence of a story in the Bible that had been said that was a fairy tale. It was a myth, would have been. I read a famous atheist called them myths. Bible and mythology. I read the whole book freshman year. I didn't have to. So we're going to talk about other things like that, how the Bible is corroborated by archaeological evidence. In other words, in what ways have the discoveries of archaeology verified the reliability of the Bible, verified the biblical accounts? So over the years, a number, including Jericho, a number of criticisms have been leveled against the story of the Bible, saying that it's not true and it's not historically accurate. And these criticisms are usually based on a lack of evidence from outside the Bible, sources outside the Bible. Extra biblical sources is what they're called, non-Christian, non-Jewish sources. So do we hear about the history of the Israelite from the history of, say, the Assyrians or the Hittites or the Egyptians? What do we know from their history, and do they corroborate the story of the Bible? You know this word corroborate, correct? Okay, great. And so it can't be trusted unless we have corroborating evidence outside of the Bible. This is what they say. In other words, the Bible is guilty until it's proven innocent. Now, biblical history is the only history that has to meet that test. The history of the Hittites and the Assyrians and the Egyptians is believed from their own writings. Only the history of the Israelites, only the history of the Jews is not believed based on their own writing. So, what corroboration do we have? The standard's different, obviously. So what corroboration do we have outside of the Bible that the Bible story is true? There are more stories that I could tell you than we could have time in this whole year of classes. So I'm just going to give you a few specific things. So there are these clay tablets that were found in northern Syria at Ebla. And they were founded in the 1970s, and they had writings on them about the patriarchs of Judaism, the patriarchs of the Old Testament. It was not the Old Testament. It was from a source outside of that, from the people that lived there. And these tablets dated back to about 2,300 years BC. I think I'm old. I mean, that's old. And the persons and the places matched the Bible exactly. It told the same story. For example, they said before that those were found in the 70s, they said there was no name of Canaan. That land was never called Canaan. In those tablets discovered at Elah, it called the land of the Jews Canaan. 2,300 years before Christ, it did that. And so the critics got it wrong, and the Bible got it right. They also said that the word in Genesis, remember in Genesis 1 where it says that God hovered over the deep? That word, the Spirit of God hovered over the deep. That word in the Hebrew is tehom. And they said there was no such Hebrew word. That word was found, and it meant the same thing on those tablets from 2300 BC. It showed, it told the story of Moses, it didn't tell the story. So it used, it was written 800 years before Moses. But the ancient customs and reflected the stories that the patriarchs had told that Moses wrote 800 years later. Because he wrote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and that is the Pentateuch, the five first books of the Bible. It was also once thought that the Hittites were a biblical legend. You know, the famous Hittites that were the enemy of Israel, and that was legendary. It didn't really happen until some records were discovered in Turkey that there was a group of Hittites, and they were the enemies of Israel. Also found in those tablets were stories of Solomon's wealth, which many scholars believed was exaggerated. But those tablets, not written by Jews, but written by people that lived in Turkey, of the wealth, of the extent of his wealth, his great unmatched wealth, and it matched what the Bible said. King Sargon is mentioned as a king of Assyria in the Old Testament, and it was believed, scholars believe that there never was a King Sargon of Assyria. And then King Sargon's palace was discovered, and in Iraq, and King Sargon is written about in Isaiah 20. And get this, the very story that Isaiah tells about Sargon in Isaiah 20 was written on the walls of his palace. So the Bible again and again has been corroborated. King Belshazzar, Daniel's boss, he was the king of Babylon, and he's named in Daniel 5. And it was believed that the last king of Babylon was why didn't they name him Joe? Nabonidus. Nabonidus. And so the Bible says that Belshazzar was king. No, he wasn't. Nabonidus was. And then tablets were discovered saying that Nabonidus had a son. Guess what his name was? Belshazzar. His name was Belshazzar, and he was co-regent. He was co-king with his father. And so he very well could have made Daniel the third most important person in the nation, and that's what the Bible says. So again, it's corroborated. I'm going to show you some pictures now. We're going to watch a little bit. Oh, why is that? I need to go back. I'm going to show you some pictures here. This is, by the way, this is the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and it's apparently very interesting. And there are a lot of artifacts, biblical artifacts, that are in this museum. I've never been. My sister, my nephew and his wife used to live in D.C., but now they live in Ankara, Turkey. So Georgianne doesn't have reason to go there, and she's moving to Switzerland anyway. But I hope that we can visit that someday. And a lot of these artifacts, like the ones I'm about to show you, and I don't know if these are in there, but similar artifacts are in there. So this is a scroll. This is an ancient scroll. I don't know if this is one of the scrolls from the Dead Sea Scrolls, but the Dead Sea Scrolls would have looked like this. How many of you are familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls? Most people familiar with it? Okay, well, you're about to hear the story in a nutshell. I'm going to pause so that we don't get in trouble. Scholars used to say that there was no Caiaphas as the high priest when Jesus, or Caiaphas wasn't the high priest at the time of Jesus' crucifixion until his ossuary was found in Jerusalem, and his whole family, all their ossuaries. Now, let me explain ossuary. Do you even remember I did this in 10th grade? I don't know if anybody remembers this. So graves were family graves, and they weren't like plots. They were usually a cave, and inside, in the sort of first room, there were benches, several benches, in case several family members died close together. And after they died, they would wrap them, just as it's described with Jesus, wrapping with linen or with cloths, and then also with spices. And that was what we would call embalming. It didn't necessarily decay or delay the decaying process, but it muffled the smell a little bit. And so then after about a year, then when all the soft tissue had decayed, they'd go back in and they'd take the person's bones and they'd put it in a box called an ossuary. And in the back part of the tomb, there would be these niches in the wall. And those ossuaries would be put into the niches with the information etched on the outside. This ossuary says Caiaphas, Joseph Caiaphas, high priest, AD 18 to 36. Who was high priest when Jesus was crucified? Joseph. And we have the bones of his entire family. His wife is there. His children are there as well. We don't have them, but they've been found. And then this is a tablet. So there were some scholars that believed that that some of what was known about David was untrue. There were no annals of David outside of that until this House of David, what was found in Syria, I think, I don't know, but outside of Israel. And it tells the story of David's reign. Now, this is not a Jewish story or Jewish writer. This is a pagan writer writing the same story about David that the Bible tells. So that was found in 1993. And then another thing, and I was actually learned this, I was taught it, I didn't learn it because it's not true, in college, that crucifixion was a Roman killing, but it wasn't practiced in Palestine at the time Jesus was killed. Until they found bones of obviously crucifixion victims from the first century AD, proving that crucifixion was a practice that the Romans foisted on people in the first century. So this is just a small smattering of some of the evidences we have, some of the archaeological evidence we have for the veracity of the Bible. And you can find many, many more. We'll end this lecture on Monday talking about the historical writers, external test of historical writers. It shouldn't take us very long, and you will have some time to to work on the project that I'm about to give to you. I'm going to keep the thing rolling while I read this to you. Again, I don't want you to get too worked up. This is not a big deal. The articles you're going to read are 1 to 2 pages, so they're not long.
Scripture should design.
Your brother?
Oh, I need
How do you make a music license? Hey Elijah, how do you work with music? Would you,
Okay, so here's what I'm asking you to do. You're going to get a blog post by Michael Kruger, and he has these 10 facts that show the truthfulness of the Bible, that the Bible we have is the correct Bible. And so you're going to read that blog post, and there's 10 of them. You're going to read one, only one. Now we have 20-ish people in this class, so I want each of those facts represented, each of the 10. So I won't allow anyone in this any more than 2 people to have the same fact. Does that make sense? So if once 2 people have that fact, we're moving on, okay? And that fact is no longer available. So you're going to do 2 things. You're going to write at least 2 paragraphs, approximately 1 page, a 2-page summary of the fact presented in the blog post about the New Testament canon. You're going to explain what he's saying, what his argument is in that blog post. And then I want you to include in that what you think about it. Is it compelling? Is it compelling evidence for the reliability of the New Testament? In other words, answer the following question. Does this fact support the canonicity of the 27 books of the New Testament? Why or why not? Do you think it's a good argument? And then you're going to present your findings to the class. So you're going to give a presentation of that fact to the class. Now, boys? I'll talk to you after. So then I'm fine if you just read what you wrote. This isn't no PowerPoint, no bells and whistles, no, visual displays. You can just read what you wrote aloud so everybody can hear it. I want everybody to learn. So you're going to teach each other. Does that make sense? You're only going to read and write about one blog post. I want everybody to know about all of the blog posts. Make sense? Okay, so it's not a great big deal. Both. It's multiple blog posts, but each only has one fact. You're only going to read and write and talk about one, and then you'll hear about all the others. Okay. So each portion, the written and the oral, will be worth 20 points. So the total thing will be worth 40 points. It will count as your test grade for lesson 4. Your written portion will be graded on content. Did you write a clear and complete summary of the fact? Neatness, well, not neatness, because please type it. Spelling, punctuation, and grammar. I want it double-spaced and one-sided. Don't ever turn anything into me, single-spaced and back-to-back, okay? So double-spaced, one-sided, typed, and then you can read that as your oral presentation. Your oral presentation will be graded on presentation. Did you give a clear, compelling presentation? Clarity of speech. Could I hear you and understand you? Grammar, those sorts of things. And I will give you, on Monday, I will give you a rubric for this as well. Yes? In all, 2 paragraphs in all. This is the blog posts are not very long. So there's no way that your explanation and your opinion, like you're going to give an explanation and an opinion. Now, if you give me 2-3 sentence paragraphs, don't expect a good grade. But if you give me 2 good paragraphs, you're going to be fine. Okay? Got that? Okay. So you're going to pick, and this is just going to kind of be a